The mules are in the corral. Welcome to Mule Talk, and I'm Cindy K. Roberts, your host.
And my sidekick, our author, TV personality, and world-renowned mule trainer, Meredith Hodges of the Lucky 3 Ranch. When I would go to look at a mule, Meredith, the first thing it would do when I put my foot in the stirrup, it would just take off. It knew that it was going to take off. Anyway, we're going to talk today about learning to stand still for mounting. You go with it, Meredith.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'd like to start by saying that is a very common problem. And, it irritated me when my animals would do that too. And way back when, I didn't know that it wasn't their fault. I didn't realize that I had to look to myself yet again for these problems that arise with these animals because, as I've said before, they have a completely honest response to what we are doing.
Yeah.
What we don't realize is the things that we're learning from our own society that is moving at 1,000 miles an hour without stopping, and we're all trying to keep up. So it keeps us in a constant state of tension, anxiety, and wondering what's happening next. And then we take that attitude to our animals when we're training them. We get irritated when they won't do what we want. So our irritation, they can feel it. It's the vibes we're giving them. And something as simple, one of the first things I ran into was, why doesn't my horse or why won't my mule stand still when I'm just leading them, say, and stopping somewhere, or leading them in a showmanship class? You lead them and then you stop, but they don't stop. Their head goes up, and then they start walking circles around you.
Right.
And then you end up walking around pulling on them, and then they pull harder, then you pull harder, and you end up going in a big circle, which invariably puts you in the wrong position because they get kind of ahead of you, and they put you right by the haunches where they can kick you if they want to. I looked at that very long and hard, and I thought, well, why are they moving? Well, because I'm moving. It's that simple. I'm moving. So I thought, well, what would happen if when I ask them to whoa, if I just go ahead and let them move and they'll walk around the front of me, and then if I just switch the lead rope to my other hand, let them walk the circle, now they're going to walk around the back of me, and I'll just take my hand around the back and then grab it with the other hand again, but I'm going to stand still and let them walk as much as they think they have to. But I found that if I stood still, then their anxiety and their movement would slow down, and eventually they would stop. That's just giving them time to observe me, to see that I'm not going to chase them around, that we're not going to do anything out of the blue, that's going to come as a big surprise or anything like that. And it's not keeping them busy. Our solutions, because of our society is so busy that we are kept busy because we have learned that that's the best way to alleviate any tension that we have. When you're young and you're busy and full of all this vigor hormones and enthusiasm and energy, keeping busy becomes a real task. We've found if we do drugs and alcohol, it slows it down. If we start smoking, it slows it down. If we want to quit smoking because we realize it's not very healthy to do that, then like I did, I picked up hooking rugs and knitting. But it seemed like the more busy I was with the hands, the more tension I felt. And the faster I wanted to do the rugs and the knitting. And then, of course, I'd make mistakes, and it didn't look so good when I got done with it.
Not good.
Not a good response, but it kind of opened my mind to staying busy is not the answer. And then I was looking into the things that they say if you've got an animal that flips his tongue over the bit, for instance. They suggest that you get a bit that has a mouthpiece on it that they can fiddle with. But if you put that kind of bit in their mouth, that only exacerbates the vice of flipping the tongue around
Sure.
and playing with the bit. I thought, well, I want to stop this behavior and I want to stop this tension. So I got to make it hard for them to do it. And that's why I use an English bridle with a drop noseband that forces them to take contact with the bit. And I get a mild egg butt snaffle bit in the beginning for training. And then when I was showing, I was required to use a Western bit with a shank on it. But I would just use one with a very low port, something that would not make them want to flip their tongue around. And I would train in a Western bridle with a noseband to keep their mouth shut on it. But the first initial training I did with the English bridle, because that's where you got to get into turning and backing and all of these things. And then that's before you have to use a shank bit for a senior Western pleasure class. So they would learn all this other stuff with their mouth just tied shut. And they would learn to hold that bit the right way in their mouth so that they could feel any kind of movement in my hands through the reins. And I could keep the movement very delicate because they weren't expecting any harsh movement. They flip their tongue around because they get jerked on, they get pulled on.
Yeah.
And even if you think you're being gentle, the movement itself, the tongue is very, very fragile and delicate. And they can feel anything, and maybe it doesn't cause pain, but it does cause aggravation. Now, a good example of this, for instance, is that they're not given the time to think about what it is that you're trying to teach them. Because things are moving so fast, they don't have time to think about it. And neither do we in our society. I mean, think about this when you're just driving down the road and they've been taking out all the stoplights and replacing them with roundabouts. At least when we had stoplights, we could stop at a red light and think about what we were going to do next. But when you got a roundabout, all of a sudden you're there in a roundabout and then you're thinking, oh, well, how do I get out of this thing? What turn am I supposed to make?
Right.
And it creates anxiety and tension. These so-called solutions that people are coming up with are not something that's going to help you to stop, think, and then act. With our animals, I get requests from people all the time. Oh, what toys can I get for my animals? They're popping the balls, they're stomping everything else, and I'm paying good money for these things, and they're just ruining them, and there isn't a toy I've gotten my animals so far that they haven't ruined within 3 weeks. Don't give them any toys. Just do a 5-hour turnout so they can be out and about, and if you've got other animals, they can play with their friends, and they can learn to play with them nicely, because when you're doing your training, you're employing good manners, you are employing a polite response, and so in your training, you're teaching them how to be comfortable and how not to be thinking about things that cause anxiety. I mean, toys that's silly. I've given my donkey some soccer balls, but that's only because Wrangler is right next to a female that goes into heat sometimes, and he gets frustrated because they're separated, but I don't want him jumping on her all the time.
Yeah.
So I leave him next to her, but I give him a soccer ball, and what he does is he picks it up and he throws it into her pen, and then she throws it back to him, and now they're playing a sports game. They're not just chasing the ball around in frustration and biting on it and attacking it or anything else like that. They've learned to play a little game, and it's better than him trying to jump over the fence and mount her. But I don't want to take her away from him, because then he'd be all pissed off at me for moving her. You know, so I try to find a happy medium to the things that I'm doing with them, and try to find some cooperation on both sides, some mutual satisfaction. And that seems to work pretty well. They don't always go for it, but they'll stop complaining after a while. And it's the same problems when you talk about mounting these guys, but you're not willing to go through what it takes to develop their core strength so that they can stand still easily while you're mounting. Well, think about what happens when you're mounting. I saw something on Facebook that I thought was genius. This one gal, it was an observation that she made when she was mounting. So she made the suggestion that instead of grabbing the saddle horn and the cantle and sticking your foot in the stirrup and dragging yourself up while you pull the saddle sideways over the spine is probably not a really good idea. So it's probably smarter to grab the mane over the withers and the cantle of the saddle. And then when you do that, grab the mane, but push your arm as far over to the other side as you can, so you can brace your arm against the neck, too, on the other side. This will keep the animal more balanced when you put your weight in the stirrup and hike yourself over, hike your leg over. And I think that's a smart thing to do. But with an animal that doesn't have core strength, to hold his postural position with equal weight over all 4 feet in a squared up position, he's still going to have trouble when you put that weight on that one side. That's how important it is to develop that core strength. And you do that, it cannot be developed by riding. It cannot be developed by doing anything else but leading exercises in that hourglass pattern that we keep talking about. There's a lot of things that happen in that hourglass pattern that you kind of take for granted. You go through and pass the 2 cones on the short side, come towards the cones that are closer together in the middle, but you don't think about the fact that if you're tracking left, you are leading from the left side. But the way you're leading is really important because you cannot interfere with the development of all the elements, the muscles, the ligaments, the tendons, the cartilage, the soft tissue, and everything that's around the bones. So you cannot lead with that right hand under their chin. You have to take the lead rope in your left hand on your left side and leave a loop across your belly so that the animal can be completely 100% responsible for his own body carriage without interference from you. And people say, well, if I've got the lead rope in my left hand, then he's going to cross over in front of me or he's going to run ahead. Well, let me tell you about something else. When you have your crimped oats in a fanny pack around your waist, he knows they're there, and he's not going to run off ahead, and he's not going to jerk the lead rope out of your hand, because he knows if he does what you want him to do, you're going to take those oats from that fanny pack, and you're going to give him some. Now, he might decide to cross over in front of you and go to the other side where your hand is holding the lead rope, and then he can dive in and grab at the fanny pack. But if you are pointing in the direction of travel with your right hand, like I've told you to do, and he tries to do that, you can just use that right hand, put it over his nose, and push him back with his head at your shoulder and say, no, you don't get your oats until we stop. And I will tell you when that is. Then you can say, walk on, and you start to walk on. And then you look down at the front feet, and you see what leg he's leading with or she's leading with. And you do the same thing, and you match them step by step by step. What does this do? It gives them a visual of your intent. And it's a clear visual when you're consistent. And when you're matching their steps, you don't make them match yours. You match theirs. And then when you want to stop, you go, and, whoa, and give them the verbal command, and gives them time to know that you're going to say something without doing it abruptly. And then you give the command to whoa, and then you stop with your feet together. And the first few times you're going to have to tug a little bit on you might have to reach up, grab the lead rope, and just tug them into the halt. Just lower your pointing hand And sometimes you don't have to grab the lead rope. All you have to do is put that hand across the front of it, which creates tension on the halter right under their chin. And when you say, and whoa, and then you stop and they stop, then you turn to their shoulder and you set them up for square, because you want them to find that good posture where when they're at rest, it's the most comfortable, and it's the most comfortable when you have all 4 feet with equal weight over all 4 feet. That distributes their weight in an even fashion, takes all the tension off all their muscles and everything, and allows them to settle in that position. And in the beginning, it's not going to be comfortable for them because they're not used to being in good posture. You have to teach them what good posture is, just like my grandmother taught me. She put a book on my head, and she said, you're going to be a sorry old woman if you don't learn to walk in good posture and have good manners. And at first, the book kept falling off my head and kept falling off my head. And I kept moving weird ways, but I found that every time I moved out of good posture, it fell off my head. So it took me a little bit of time before I learned to carry my own body in good posture and keep that book on my head. And the longer I did it, the more comfortable it became and the easier it became to do that. Well, that's the same thing that these animals have to do. They have to learn. Can't put a book on their head. They've got 4 legs instead of 2, and they would never figure out how to keep that book on their head. But they would learn how to dump it on the ground.
Oh, yeah.
They figure those things out really quick. But they soon do figure out that if they go ahead and square up for you, that you'll give them the oats. And then the next thing they're going to learn is that you're going to wait for them to chew those oats. You're not going to give them the treat right away and say, oh, good boy, that's good, you did right, now let's go. No, you're going to teach them that you're going to stand still and wait for them to finish chewing their oats. That means they don't have to move. You don't have to move. You're both standing still, but what you don't realize is that you're passively teaching them to stand still and be comfortable that way. The only thing they have to move is their jaw to chew.
Right.
And they tell you when they're licking and chewing that they're relaxed. And if they're chewing out, they're licking and chewing. So they're relaxed. And they learn to be relaxed in that position. And then instead of just abruptly going on, you're polite enough. When they finish chewing, you go, okay, say their name, turn around, get in your leading position. That gives them time to figure out, oh, what are we doing next? It's not abrupt. It doesn't create anxiety. It doesn't create tension, which results in resistance. They just wait in that comfortable position until you say their name and give the command to walk on. Then you look down at their legs and you do exactly the same thing. But what you've had to do that is a little different is you had to change sides. Because now you've been leading from the left side, but now you're going towards those cones in the middle, and the bend is going to be different. It's going to be to the right. And you always want to be leading from the inside of the arc. So before you say their name and walk on, you're going to pet them, you're going to talk to them and say, good boy, good girl, and you're going to cross over in front of them so they don't think you're going to walk on. You stop them right where they are so they can stay in the same position and stay relaxed. And then you walk calmly over to the other side. You switch the lead rope into your right hand. Put the left hand in front of their face now. Then you give the command to walk on. And you do all this very slowly, very calmly, so they have time to figure out what you're doing, giving them time at the stoplight instead of putting them in a roundabout. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
That makes sense?
Oh, sure.
So they're not going to walk off on you or anything like that. They may do it the first couple of times until they figure out what you're doing. But if you're consistent with this and consistent with your good posture and consistent with following their front legs, they're going to catch on to just watching your body move and picking up on the example that you're setting. And they're going to put that together with the verbal commands that you're giving them and learning to talk and communicate with them on a very calm way. You know, the Dalai Lama is a man of very few words. But the one thing that I did learn when I met him, I was into George Harrison's music from the Beatles, and he loved the Dalai Lama. And they taught me how to meditate while I was in the middle of confusion and chaos. And this is how you do it, is when you do things in a very distinctive, consistent, repetitive way. It gives your brain a chance to think about what you're doing, even while you're moving through space, while you're conversing with people, because that time of meditation arises in a conversation when you allow the other side to speak and you are listening. And that happens on both sides of the conversation. So when you're going through this hourglass pattern, you're taking turns communicating. You may do something and you may tell your mule what to do, and he might be confused and doing the wrong thing. But if you're listening, you will see his response in his body language, and you will be able to respond with something calmly, not a jerk on the lead rope or anything like that. But with your voice, you can say, oh, no, we're not going to do that. Remember, I have the fanny pack. And you jiggle it, and they go. And then they stop what they're doing, and they start to listen to you. And what you have going on is a two-way conversation, because you didn't get abrupt. You didn't get tense. You didn't try forcible technique. You did a passive technique that stopped the wiggling around physically and commanded their attention be back on you. So you're asking them to listen to you, and you're listening to them because you have a proper response to their improper response to what you asked them to do. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
These are the kinds of things that take place in the hourglass pattern. Don't go at the hourglass pattern with the intention of, you're going to walk with me, and you're going to match my feet. You're going to stop when I tell you to stop. You're going to stand still and stop moving around and put equal weight over all 4 feet when I tell you to. It has to be an exchange, or it isn't going to work very well. This is why the hourglass pattern is such a good pattern to do. A lot of people would tell you, well, they'll just get pattern sour. They'll learn the pattern and then they'll know exactly how to do it. No, not really. Not in this pattern. Not if you're doing it the right way. They won't. What will happen to them physically is they're going to become more and more comfortable, because they're going to be learning about what good posture really is, and you're going to be teaching them how much more comfortable they're going to be if they just repetitively go into this squared up resting stance, that they're going to follow the arc of this circle and keep equal weight over all 4 feet. While they're on this arc, they're bending their bodies through the torso instead of leaning like a motorcycle from one side to the other, which stresses and strains muscles on each side. If they're bending to the right, for instance, they're stretching the muscles on the left. You don't want to do that, and it won't happen if they've got equal weight over all 4 feet and they're bending through their middle. It will keep everything even while they're doing that. And if you can think about it as them having an internal pendulum that is inside of at their core, and what that does is it swings. If you're turning left, it swings to the right, and it kind of reminds them to stick out that right side, and bend and suck in the left side of the torso, but it doesn't affect their leg. Their legs can stay where they are, and then when they change direction, then it kind of swings to the other side, taps them on the other side, and they suck in the opposite side. And it's just like a pendulum that's moving back and forth as they change direction. And when they come to a halt, pendulum acts. It doesn't just stop. It acts like a grandfather clock. It goes and it'll swing, but if there's no motor in it, it eventually swings back and forth a little bit less to each side until it comes to center and rests. That's what makes them comfortable, is when it's just at rest, equal weight over all 4 feet. Their center of balance has just ceased to move, and it's there. And you do the same thing when you're riding them. When you're riding them, you don't just pull them to a halt. You sink your seat into that saddle, and you relax too, by letting your own pendulum, instead of swinging from one side to the other, drop down and cease to move. And when you're both doing that, then it's comfortable for both of you, whether you're riding or whether you're ground driving. Ground driving is just a second exercise after they've gotten really good in the hourglass pattern. The first thing they will do is you'll move them to doing obstacles, which changes directions a lot more than just doing this hourglass pattern, because now you've added up, down, sideways, and everything, and that just puts coordination into the equation, and they learn to deal with that calmly, with no abrupt movements, no anxiety, no tension, which really reduces resistance. When they've learned to just go through these obstacles, then you respond with them the same way, and you ask them to stop in the middle of the obstacles in different positions. And the bridge is probably the most complicated, and the most complicated movement on the bridge is when they have to walk off the other side and leave the front feet down and the back feet up, because that's when that pendulum will start swinging chaotically.
Right.
And it'll cause anxiety in them and everything, and that's why we talk about how important it is to use a web halter, because it may be that their core just isn't strong enough to hold them in that position. And on the third try, you're going to have to get them out in front of them and help them to stay in that position. And you do that by standing in front of them and holding the noseband of the halter on both sides. And to get those front feet down, first you wiggle one side and get the first front foot down. Then you wiggle the other side and get the second front foot down. And then they're starting to wiggle all over, and the pendulum is swinging internally. But because you're there to add support, it's not swinging so chaotically that they can't stand it and have to move. They can kind of hold it, and then you wait for them to stop shaking violently, which a lot of them will. And when it subsides even a little bit, you can reach in your fanny pack and get them the oats reward for getting those 2 front feet down, and let them have those, and that creates the distraction that will cause relaxation while they chew. And then you can go ahead and take that same hand and put it back up on the noseband, and where you had to have a really good grip on the noseband, as they chew, now you can go ahead and gradually release your grip until you still have your hands around the noseband of the halter, but they're not tight. And when they're not tight, you can eventually just let go with your right hand and let go with your left, turn around, have them walk off the end of the bridge, and then you ask them to whoa, which is easy again. You stop with your front feet together, and they know you're going to whoa, and when you turn to their shoulder, they've learned you got to square up, so they do that. And then you just go ahead and give them their reward again when they're squared up and relaxed, and you wait for them to finish chewing again. And all of this, doing things very calmly and very succinctly, detailed, repetitive, in a progressive sequence that is easy to follow That's what they learn.
Sure.
They learn, oh, when she does this, then I do that. When she does this, then I do this, and they know what's coming up, and they can do it easily, so it doesn't create all that anxiety and ultimately resistance. And these habits that we want new habits, because the old habits are coming from the old ways of dealing with them. And most of the old ways we do are abrupt. They do kind of surprise them, and it keeps them all jacked up. The other thing that we don't even think about that keeps them jacked up is what we're feeding them.
Oh, yeah.
Grass, hay, and oats with vitamins in it and corn oil for their hooves, their coats, and their digestive tract regularity are very simple foods, and yes, you can get them, but you have to go after them in some places, because you have to realize that these businesses are getting a cut from selling these over-advertised brands. Everybody's got a new brand. Everybody's product is better. And I found that simple box of Cheerios is all the cereal I need.
Right.
I don't need Frosted Flakes or Fruit Loops or Cocoa Puffs or any of those kind of things. In fact, they kind of make me sick when I eat them.
Right.
You know? And I think it's the same thing with the feeds. We forget. First of all, our mules and donkeys are desert animals. They don't require rich feeds and lush feeds. And when you give them stuff like that, yeah, they can be produced really easily with probably lower production cost and all of that kind of stuff. But they don't tell you what it does to the inside of your animals, because basically they don't know. They research these things in laboratories with cells, but that's not the same as feeding a living animal, and much less keeping a herd on hand to test with. That would cost them too much money. They wouldn't be able to make a profit. So they don't do it that way. They're using us as guinea pigs. And then you don't know, because if you're an owner, usually only have one or two animals, and you don't have a whole herd to gain any kind of assessment from, like I've had no less than 32 animals since 1980, and they just started dropping off in 2014, and I'm down to 16 now. But I had a field study going on with 32 animals for a very long time, and animals that I had rescued just to make it harder, just to see what the effect of the feed would be on them. And this grass hay oats mix and everything has gotten every single one of them healthy. And every single one of them has calmed down. Even spastic Frances, she bolts, runs, and has a violent reaction because of her history before I got her when she was 7 years old. But now she doesn't stand in the corner and shake anymore.
Right.
Now she's learned that she doesn't have to run away from me. She still stands like a little soldier and is afraid to move. But that's okay, because I don't care as long as she's not shaking, and as long as she's exhibiting a certain amount of tension, but she's not having a violent reaction. She's not bolting. She's not running. She will let me put her halter on. She'll let me groom her without the halter even. She lets me use the clippers. She lets me pick up her feet and clean her feet. She just doesn't want to go and be ground-driven, because that's how she got abused. So I respect that. If that's something that sends her into next week, then okay, we won't do it.
Right.
I got enough animals to ride and drive. I don't need her to do it. So we've negotiated this, and these days she has become the seeing eye mule for my miniature horse, who is he's considerably older than her and is starting to go blind, but she provides a seeing eye dog for him.
Oh, good.
And if you want to have your animal have a job, it doesn't have to mean a job for you. They can be doing things, even if they're just standing around in the corral and you have visitors every once in a while, they can be an example of an animal that those visitors can look at, and in a lot of cases they can pet them and talk to them, and that's a job.
Right.
So it all depends on your definition of a job. Frankly, I wouldn't want to work for a boss that wanted sweat running off of me and all of that, and then they would call it a job.
Right.
Because not all jobs require that. And so I primarily concern myself with building their good manners and doing it in a relaxing way that benefits both of us. Now, we do give tours here, and people like to see the animals, but it's very hard. When you got bars on your stall doors, it's hard to see the animals. I have to have the bars on the stall doors, or they will lean over the top of the doors and undo the latch and let themselves out. So that was a negotiation, too. But I taught them to stand back when I open the stall doors or when I open a gate, and I stand there, and they stand there politely, and they don't barge or bolt through the door. And then people can see them. They can see them top to bottom. They can see how their behaviors are. And, of course, they're going to stand there. And the next thing they're going to say to me is, okay, I'm standing here. I'm standing still. Are you going to give me my oats? And I go, of course I am. And I give them to them. I say, whoa, it works. If you ask your equine to whoa, and then you keep moving, your example to them is at odds with what you're asking them to do. So every time you give them those oats, be prepared to stand still yourself, because there is no quick fix for teaching them to stand still.
Right.
It has to be a change in their habitual behavior. And you cannot change habitual behavior overnight. There are no shortcuts, but if you keep practicing these things the way that I describe, then the new way they're behaving becomes the habitual behavior. We have slowly built deep friendships with them that exceeds their relationships with their equine buddies. So you solve problems with behaving this way. My mules, for instance, are ready to come off pasture anytime I call their name. It doesn't matter. They like the oats better than the grass.
Yeah.
And they like being with me better than they like being with their buddies, because we do fun things together. Now, you can't say that when you're always doing things that cause tension and anxiety and that cause resistance as a consequence. But when you're tempering the tension and anxiety and the things that you do are fun to do together, they respond to that. This is the result of routine management, humane training practices, with a prompt and generous reward system, with a reward that is also healthy for them. If you give a kid, for instance, something as a reward that is not candy, that is not something that's going to jack them up, find out what the kid wants most and use that as a reward. And it may be something as simple as a warm hug.
Yeah, there you go.
You'd be surprised at how many people don't know how to hug anybody anymore. We're moving so fast in this society, and we have such limited communication time with people, and so many people are communicating through their phones that you don't get those warm hugs anymore. If you ever did. I never did. My family was going 90 miles an hour with their hair on fire, and my mother wanted to go to college, and my dad was drawing drawings all the time, and they had their careers in their mind, and so they were always busy. But the one thing that I craved was a warm hug. And our animals respond to that, too. When you say, oh, good boy or good girl, and you just slip your arms around their neck and put your head up against their neck and give them a nice warm hug while they're chewing their oats. Don't try to do it before you give them the oats, or they'll be searching in your fanny pack. You got to give them what they want first. Then you can take what you want, which is the hugs. We want our animals to hug us. They don't want to hug us necessarily as a first thing. They're going to want the food first. But that's just comes from observing and listening to what they're telling you, right?
There you go.
My animals are not herd bound because I not only do fun things with them, but I prepare them for the physical activities that they're going to be doing, so that those activities are not out of the blue, and they're not something that they're not physically able to do. I never ask them for more than they're able to physically give. We slowly build up their bodies and everything, and so when I ask them to do something, they can do it. And they're really happy that I ask things in a logical sequential order that they are able to execute. Side pass, for instance, you may like it that your animal comes and side passes to the fence so you can get on. And that may seem like a solution to people who recognize that when you mount them, it pulls the saddle over and then they move. But it's not the real solution to the problem. Because in order to get up to the fence, they have to side pass. That means they have to move the muscles and everything in their body in a way that they're not used to doing it. And so they can start developing soreness in their body just simply by moving over sideways so you can get on. Teaching tricks like sitting down and laying down and all of those things, they may be able to do them pretty well the first few times, but after that, if the body's not ready to do that, then they can create soreness. They can start developing arthritis. They can get uneven pressure in the cartilage in their joints, and they can start to calcify, and they create soreness that way. It's really important that you take the time to do this hourglass pattern core strength work, so that when you ask them to do these tricks like sitting down, laying down, and God knows what else, bowing, moving over sideways, so that their body is actually in a physical condition where they can do these things easily. And that's why I put my training series in the order that I did. And that's why reining and lead changes and sliding stops and side passing is all in tape number 6, because 1 through 5 is prepping first them and then you and your bodies so that you will be able to do the things in tape 6. And when you do this, then nothing, when this is done in a sequential order, in a logical order, then nothing that you do is going to hurt them.
Right.
They're going to derive pleasure from it. They're going to like our time together. That's why these things are so important, because all of this, it's not just a matter of teaching your animal to stand still, because physically they're not at a place that they can. They're about as fidgety as we are in our own society. Our society keeps us jumping. We got to go find a closet to crawl into to get any kind of peace at all.
Right.
Unless you learn to take those meditation moments, if you learn to recognize them. And when you're training and you do this with your animal, it gives you time to think about what they're doing and what they're trying to tell you. And that's meditation time. That's let-down time. That's calm-down time that you probably won't get anywhere else but with your animal. And one of the things that I ran into, too, was I used to use draw reins. Then I realized that I had to ride them to do that. You couldn't just put the draw reins on. I tried side reins so that my hands wouldn't have to be on them, so I wouldn't have to be riding them to do the exercises. But then I discovered that their head was held in a very restricted position that did not involve the rest of their body. And that was when Richard Shrake and I developed the elbow pull, and he took it one direction and I took it the other. But the action of both of our solutions has the same kind of action on the animal. It allows the animal to be in control of the restraint or the aid. And they are able to put their head all the way to the ground. They can put it all the way from side to side. The only movement they can't do, they can put their head up above their withers, but they can't flip their nose out and invert their neck and hollow their back. And that's what we needed to do to facilitate good equine posture. When you're doing all of these exercises in the hourglass pattern and everything, you don't have to concern yourself with making them be in good posture. With the elbow pull, they can do it for themselves with this elbow pull on. You just go ahead and put on their snaffle bridle, a surcingle or a light saddle. You don't want a heavy saddle because it'll put too much pressure on the back and cause them to have to work to get into good posture. They may have to work too hard, and at the very beginning, that would be very difficult for them.
Right.
So what you want to do is look and see, assess every animal individually, because some will come along faster than others. There are some people that are more athletically inclined than others. Some respond faster than others. Some have, in the case of the animals, have better conformation and are more easily able to execute the moves that you're asking than others. And that will determine how long you have to do the hourglass pattern on the lead rope, because some of them, their conformation is good. They're pretty close to being in good posture already, and it won't take as long for them to develop their core because they're not going to have to work with things that are out of whack as much. They really are grateful for this personal consideration. And this, on top of getting them in good physical shape, greatly improves their mental attitude. So being fair, respectful, clear, and consistent in handling practice with a carefully planned reward system, without bribery or indiscriminate treats, just because you feel like giving them one, will enhance the pleasure and the safety that you'll experience during the interaction with your equine. Because moving slow like this and allowing them the time to respond gets rid of those abrupt movements that they have in response to what you're doing. And it's in those abrupt moments that your safety is at risk. If they can't think for a second, this is uncomfortable, I got to let my handler know, then they're just going to bolt and run. And an animal with minimal training could very well run right straight over the top of you. Horses are notorious for this.
Oh, yeah.
Because their flight reflexes are so strong, and they always act before they think. Now, mules are just the opposite. If given the opportunity, they will think before they act. And they don't like stepping on squishy things, and they don't like knocking you down or anything. They just want to get away if you're not doing what they don't like. You're doing something that they don't like. They're thinking about it, and by taking this approach and really putting your time and effort into this hourglass pattern, anxiety and resistance is always kept to the bare minimum. Standing still has its moments in the hourglass pattern, in the obstacles. It also has its place in ground driving. And when you're ground driving, you're going to ground drive the hourglass pattern. Because what this does is it creates familiarity. They have been in this hourglass pattern on the lead rope. They've done the hourglass pattern before they do their obstacles. So it's ingrained in their brain as to what they have to do in the hourglass pattern with the elbow pull on and everything. And the verbal commands are all the same. So there isn't a whole lot to add to this. But what will happen is you'll get in the hourglass pattern and you'll stop in the designated places just like you did with the lead rope. And they know what's coming because they remember it. So when you pull on the lines, you get a slight pull on the lines and you say, whoa, they'll stop. Now, a new thing that's coming up is you're going to walk forward to their head. And as you do it, you're going to take the lines and you're going to drape them over their rump. It may surprise them a little bit, so be ready to say whoa if they kind of flinch or something when you put those lines over their butt. But if they do, you just whoa, and then you just remind them of the fanny pack. With your other hand, you put the right hand over the top of the rump with the lines, and you just wiggle the fanny pack a little bit, and then they turn around and look at you, and then you go up to their head and you give them the oats out of the fanny pack. And you stand still while they chew their oats. Then you walk back. You take the lines in your hand as you walk back, resume your position behind them, and stand absolutely still while they chew their oats. And if they chew their oats and they try to walk out on their own, you go, no, whoa, and give a slight pull on the lines. And then when they whoa, you go, okay, good, walk on. And you give them the command to walk on. And then they go, quick, she's done this before. I know what this is. Next time when she tells me to whoa, and if I finish before she gets back there and is ready to go, I'll wait. I will stand still. So they learn to wait for your commands to move, and the go-to position is stand still. We talked about going through the obstacles and stopping indiscriminately in different places and squaring up in different positions. And what this does, the changes in the obstacles and squaring up in these different positions, it helps to solidify their attention and their concentration on detail and reinforces their listening to your commands.
Right.
This is why this is so important, because otherwise, like you were saying at the beginning, these mules that you were getting on were going, oh, I know what I got to do, and then they just take off. But
right.
see, those mules were forced to move on.
Oh, sure.
Chances are, when you first get on, the mule doesn't know what to do with you, so they don't want to move. So then the next thing that comes is you thump it on their sides with your heels, and then they really don't know what that means. And so you go and get spurs, and then you gig them. And then when you do that, then when you go to get on, they move. And that's where that comes from.
Sure.
They're just trying to second guess you because they want to be obedient.
Right.
It's not that they consciously want to be disobedient. They really don't. And when you take these things in a slow sequence, for instance, they have time to think about what you're doing. You're not forcing anything on them right away. The same goes as when you're saddling them and everything. That's why you have a workstation. And you go there every time with them to groom, to saddle them and everything. Same place, same time, same things. When you do that, they get comfortable where they are. We talk about kicking training in tape 2. If your animal tends to be a kicker or really antsy about things, you've got to take the time to say, look, you got to set those boundaries. You can't do this. You can't bite me, and we have the correction for biting, and you'll be able to see it in a lot of places. Under training on my website, there's a lot of sections in there, training tips, mule crossing articles, and you can learn how to correct these aggressive behaviors. We cover kicking training at the workstation with a driving whip and how you can run it all over their bodies and discourage them from being all antsy, from kicking at you and stomping their feet and doing all these aggressive kinds of behaviors. They will just learn to accept anything you use on their bodies, whether it's a tarp or a blanket or a whip or whatever. But while you're doing it, you need to be polite. You don't do it harshly to make them kick you.
Right.
If they're going to kick you or anything, and that's going to be a problem, it's going to be because you're tickling them, not because you're beating them. They'll fight back when you beat them.
Right.
And then you won't accomplish anything. When you're getting them used to the saddle, for instance, and the blanket, and go to the front first and let them look at it. Let them look at the blanket and sniff it. Let them look at the saddle and sniff it. And then ease it up politely onto their back and set it down. Be sure that you have all the girths on the other side tied up, so when you swing that saddle up on their back, let it down easy. And those girths won't go anywhere and slap their legs or anything like that because they're tied up. And then you can just walk around the other side when you're ready to fix the girth and let them down. And when you let them down slowly and easily. And talk to them while you're doing it. Go, hey, look what I'm doing here. Oh, you're worried about this girth that's now hanging here? Just, hey, look at this. And then reach in your fanny pack and offer the oats when they come around to sniff the girth. Don't make it a scary experience. And then when you're tightening the girth, don't tighten it up right away really hard. Just do it a little at a time.
Yep.
And make it snug, but not too tight. Then we talked about getting on. It's okay to get on in a workstation. That's the first place I mount them, when they're tied up and they don't even have the bridle on. They can't have the bridle on. If I want them to pull their head around to my knee, which is what people do when the bridle's on first and they're on board, that's jumping a lot of steps. So I prefer to do it at the tax station. Now, my workstation is indoors, and it's got lights above it and everything, but doing this slowly and the way that I do it and teaching them every step at a time doesn't make them antsy in the workstation. They're already calm in the workstation because of all the prior training that I've done there before I ever put the saddle on their back and climb on. A lot of people wonder, oh, you shouldn't get on with that ceiling above you. They might rear up and smash you into it. Well, I guess if they didn't learn to be calm, they might want to do that.
Sure.
I'll give you that. That would be their response to abrupt behavior. Mm-hmm. But nothing I've done with them to this point has been abrupt behavior, and the exercises and everything that they've done and being in that workstation and being approached calmly and politely all that time has taken no less than a year to 18 months. So we have an habitual behavior of standing still. And that's what I expect them to do when I climb on them. They've learned to stand still by all of these different things that we've done for the whole previous year, and some of them take 18 months, but they've learned to stand still. And they've learned that I don't do abrupt behaviors, so I feel perfectly confident about getting on, but I don't even do that right away. First, they have to see the mounting block, and they got to see that it's okay to have it sitting right next to them. Then I have to climb up and down the mounting block and pet them while I'm doing it, and give them their oats reward for standing still. And then I put my foot in the stirrup, and then I let myself down. Then I put my foot in the stirrup, and then I let myself down. And when they're standing still for that, then I give them their oats reward. Then I do it again a few times, and then the next step is to swing my leg over the saddle and sit. And just sit still. And then if they continue to stand still, then I can give them their reward, and I give it to them on both sides by putting the oats in my hand and leaning over towards their muzzle. And at first, they're kind of incensed. You just invaded my space. What the heck do you think you're doing? And they'll get kind of stiff and look forward, and their ears will be back on you. And they'll be looking back on their eyes, but they don't want to move their head around to the side. So I kind of have to put my hand to the outside and let a few oats drop to the floor. And then they go, oh, I know what that is. And then they go ahead and move their head around. But sometimes some of the not as trusting ones need that extra step. Some of them, they go, oh, you got your hand out, there's oats in it, fine, I'll take them. It's all in their individual personalities. And so you got to be willing to break this down into the smallest steps possible. And then once I've gotten on, and they're calm with it, and they're taking the oats out of my hand, and I'm going up and down and swinging the leg over and everything. Every time I get to sit in that saddle and they take those oats from me, I do it from both sides because I'm going to get off on the opposite side I got on.
Right.
And that's just a matter of training them from both sides. I don't care where I'm coming from. I want you to stand still, and they will do it. I will go up and down and have the mounting block on one side, then I'll move it to the other. I'll go up and down and get over them, get off the other side. And I do all of this at the workstation. And then once they're really calm and nothing I do gets them excited or anything like that, and they're totally standing still for me, then I move it into the round pen. I will even, in some instances, I will go ahead and put the bridle on and the saddle on and everything and let them stand there, and then without getting on and off, I will detach the lead rope put the halter over their bridle. I'll take the halter off and leave them stand there with their halter, or not with their halter. I'll let them stand there with their bridle on and their saddle on, but I haven't said, come on. I am not leading them, and I will walk a little ways away from them and hang up the halter on the end of the hitch rail, because you can't just go throw it on the ground or walk away and then stand there and look at them, because then they're going to look at you and they're going to go, okay, what are you doing now? Now you're sneaking around.
Right.
Everything that we do has to have a purpose. And that's why when I take the halter off, I just take the halter off, untie the lead rope, take it to the end of the hitch rail, hang it on the end of the hitch rail, and they go, oh, you wanted to hang up my halter. Are you coming back? And I go, yeah, I'm coming back. And I go back, and I give them the oats for standing still, waiting for me. That's how you teach them to ground tie, by the way. So they go, oh, well, that's okay. And then we go to the round pen and repeat all those exercises in the round pen in the open and get on both sides. I find that when I keep my body low over their back and neck, that they don't get as excited as when I sit up. And I will do it that way in the workstation first, too. I will lean over their neck. Of course, I have to lean over their neck to stretch my arm out for them to get the oats out of my hand. So I've laid the foundation for that, and they don't get excited about that when they've got their oats that they're getting from that position. And then as they're chewing, I can slowly straighten up my body and sit up straight on them, and it doesn't flap them. They figure, oh, that's just one more thing that's coming. Now, when you're in the round pen, you got a lot of open space and they're not tied up. So at this point, if you're not clear about the details and not sure about implementing all these details effectively in a repetitive, consistent way, it's probably a good idea to get an assistant at this stage and just put a halter over the bridle, and I'll have your assistant standing there with a lunge line. Don't use a lead rope. It's too short if they decide to bolt. So you just want your assistant there if they do decide to run off or bolt while you're trying to get on them, that your assistant can pull in the lunge line a little bit and help you. You will still hang on to your rein on the left side where you're mounting, and you will be the first thing they feel on the bridle. But if they don't respond nicely to it, then you've got an assistant there to help you turn them back. And they're less likely to run very far and get the idea they can do that. So you just have the assistant help you. You put your foot in the stirrup just like you do and do everything the same way you did in the workstation. But like I said, if they start to move off instead of standing still, you just say, whoa, and you bring them back. If they're not coming back with your left rein, you just have your assistant. They need to know beforehand. If they make it start pulling on you, it's time for the assistant to rein in her lunge line too, because two of you can turn them around. And when they turn around, you reach in your fanny pack and you reward them and you say, good boy, I'm glad you came back to me. I like it when you whoa.
There
and
you
you
go.
repeat, whoa, whoa, whoa.
There you go. That's right.
Your assistant is really there only for safety's sake, but it gives the illusion to your animal that he's just standing there to be lunged. He's experienced lunging before because you've lunged him without riding. This is why I say it can take up to 18 months to do this stuff, and even maybe 2 years on a slow learner, because they may have to go through lunging and then your ground driving before they are really solid and standing still. Because during lunging, you're going to have them loose on the rail, and they're going to have to learn to walk, trot, whoa, back, reverse, and all of that. But when you say whoa, they need to learn to just stop And with the postural exercises, you're actually setting them up for a good balance stop that you will be learning and executing in the reining exercises in tape number 6. If they can't balance their body, they're not going to be able to do a proper reining stop. And they might twist a tendon or sprain an ankle and stuff like that, which hurts. They won't like to do that.
Right.
The other thing, too, is when you're mounting, be advised again how you mount. And try to get that left hand that has the reins in it, should have both. They should be slackened. Now, a lot of people feel very uncomfortable and they want control over the animal when they're mounting.
Right.
But the rein is not going to do it. It's going to be your voice saying whoa repetitively, and they know what to expect. That means you want them to stand still. So you keep the reins fairly even, fairly slack, and when you put that left hand up on their neck, put it as far over the neck to the other side as you can and grab mane. And then grab the cantle with your right hand as you lift yourself up in the saddle. And stay low and take your upper body over to the other side as you're mounting to even up the weight distribution so it doesn't hardly pull them to the side. They don't like it when they're pulled off balance, and that's usually what they're responding to when they spook or bolt or move or anything like that. Just keep those things in mind. And the more balanced that you are in your mounting practices, the more easily your animal is going to be able to accept it. When you're confident that they will stand still really well, then you don't have to concern yourself with mounting so much as draping your body over their body and then reaching as far on the other side as you can and running your arms all the way from their shoulder up their neck as far as you can reach, and from the stirrup all the way as far back as you can reach and as far under as you can reach. So they're feeling pressure everywhere on their body, so that if anything comes out of the blue, if your blanket slips down too far or something falls out of a saddlebag or anything and touches them, they're not going to be surprised by it because they've already had you desensitizing their body. And this has a lot to do with my article called Beyond Imprinting. This is advanced imprinting. This is touching their body and finding out where they flinch, where they're more apt to have soreness, and where they aren't. When you go over that shoulder blade, that skin is pretty thin right there. If you are pushing too hard with your hands, they're likely to flinch and move. You want to make sure that when you put your hand over the shoulder blade and up towards the neck, that you lighten up over the shoulder blade, and you can put more pressure on the neck that has more fat over everything, over the bones, and it can tolerate more pressure. And try to make it more pleasurable. Because if something happens to them while you're riding them or anything, and it hits any of those areas, it might sting a little on the shoulder blade if it's a rock, but then they'll know it's not going to continue. And then when you're riding, you can lean over and pet them on the neck and they won't go anywhere. They'll just stand still because that's what you're doing here. Right. You're touching them all over, and you're teaching them that if they're getting touched anywhere on the body, they're supposed to stand still. So then on the other side from your hands, you should go ahead and use your legs and go up and down their body with your legs, because that's a different kind of pressure. And that's a more imposing obstacle. Your arms are kind of narrow and not so imposing, but your legs, when you're starting to raise them from your hips and going up their neck towards their eyes, they're going to go, what the heck are you doing now? But if you monitor the pressure and how fast you are doing it so that it's not imposing, so that it's not irritating to them, You do it towards the front, and then you take your other leg and you move it towards the back. And then you go ahead and twist your body back into the position where you're sitting on the saddle, and the arms are on both sides, the legs are on both sides, and you dismount the other side. That's just to keep them from trying to predict what side you're going to get off, and you just dismount on the opposite side from which you mounted every time. Get them used to it. When you're sitting on them, go ahead and rock your weight from side to side and let them feel how the saddle moves on their back. Continually reassure them during this procedure by firmly but gently touching him all over his body. Lean forward and ask him to take the oats from your hand on both sides while you're laying across his back and your legs are going up over his rump. If he's being rewarded, he's not going to mind this. And you do as much in any one lesson as he can tolerate. Then it's time to get used to the mounting block and the round pen. Do them the same way that you did in the workstation. Get him used to it. Let him look at it. Climb up on it. Climb down from it. Climb up, put your foot in the stirrup. Climb back down again before you actually get on. And at this point, it's nice to have an assistant because he's not tied up. And if he moves away from the mounting block, your whole exercise could be blown. So you have your assistant there, but he's going to be passive. He's just going to stand at the head. And your animal's used to having somebody at the head because when you were mounting, you had him there with the lunge line. And he's already learned that if he tries to bolt or anything, the assistant is going to pull on the lunge line at the same time you pull on the reins, and then he's going to have to stop anyway. The whole thing is you want to be very meticulous about the way you approach everything and pay attention to detail. One of the things, too, when you're dismounting, you can use, I want to mention at this point, too, you can use either a Western saddle or an English saddle. It doesn't really matter which one, whatever you prefer. Just make sure that in the beginning that he is wearing a lightweight saddle for the leading training and the core strength training. By the time he gets to the round pen, you can, because you have to get on, you can go ahead and use a heavier saddle that you're used to. And he can get used to that too, because now he has his core strength firmly developed from all of the work that he's done in the last 18 months to 2 years. When you dismount, always take both feet out of the stirrups before you dismount. And grab your hands in the mounting position as you swing your leg back over. You would be in a very awkward position if your equine becomes frightened and shies away and your foot goes through the stirrup. That is not good. So you always want to take your feet out of the stirrups before you dismount. And just do the mounting process backwards. Practicing good technique will keep you and your equine safe and comfortable during all your lessons. By the time your equine is ready for the open arena or on the trail, he will clearly know the meaning of whoa. He will clearly know how to put equal weight over all 4 feet and stand in good posture. He will be patient. He will wait for your command to walk on. You'll be able to halt him at any time with confidence about his absolute obedience. So if you're on the trail and you say, whoa, by golly, he'll whoa. He'll stand 4 square and wait for his next command. And he will not snatch grass while you're riding. So, you know how many people lose the head when they're going on a trail ride?
Oh, yeah.
This stuff does not happen with shortcuts. This kind of behavior is you are changing his instinctual and habitual behavior into a very programmed habitual behavior that he will carry for the rest of his life. And when you take the time to go through this process, however slow it may seem, it can save you a lot of potential harm that could result in some pretty extraordinary doctor bills and vet bills for you and your equine. It's these little things that happen along the trail that get you hurt. Speeding up, slowing down, halting, backing becomes a representation of your ultimate mutual cooperation with each other. And like I said, it doesn't happen overnight. So teaching your animal standing to stand still is not just another command. It's a process. It's a process that you need to have patience for, that you need to go through meticulously, that you have to make sure that your animal is learning every step of the way. And if he is, you'll be able to go to the gate, call his name, and he'll come a-running.
Well, that's good.
You like that?
I love it. Anxiety, that just creates problems.
Yes, you're absolutely right.
So,
Tension causes problems.
oh, yeah.
Forcing things causes problems.
Yes.
How about learning how to enjoy the time you have with your animal? Since being in society causes tension and anxiety,
Yeah.
but here you have the opportunity to just go through things slowly with your animal and allow both of you thinking time.
I love that. I really value and relish the time I spend with my mule because it's so relaxing.
Yeah, that's where I go to get relaxed. When I find myself getting upset about anything, I just say to myself, Self, it's time to go see the mules.
All right. Well, I think it's lunchtime.
I think so.
Well, Meredith, thank you. You have a good one, and we will talk soon.
Yes, we will. You have a good one, too.
Meredith's website is lucky3ranch.com, and you can call her at 1-800-816-7566. And I can be reached through my website, everycowgirlsdream.com.
Gotta go. My mule is looking for me.
Mule Talk is an Every Cowgirl's Dream production.